Recently a few people have queried some of our exploration trips to the woodlines. The woodlines were train tracks that extended hundreds of kilometres into the bush, where tens of millions of tonnes of wood were cut to supply the furnaces in Kalgoorlie, Boulder and Coolgardie for the mines. The wood was also used at the pump stations on the Mundaring water pipeline, as well as for firewood and the locomotives. The operations started before the turn of the previous century, that is, before 1901, and lasted until the 1960s. Surprisingly, the bush has recovered, and many of these areas have not been visited since being left when the wood was cut out. Some of these areas are more than 100 years old now. Some intrepid people have explored out there before us, often decades ago. In some areas there are no visible tracks into the campsites anymore. I would suggest that less than 100 people have been to some of these old campsites since they were abandoned. And sometimes we think we see a modern beer bottle, but it is never the case. They are always very old, sometimes from England, and made from far thicker glass than modern stubbies. Our trips to the bush in WA take many months of research and planning. It isn't just the vehicles we have to worry about. We have to be self-sufficient with water and food. We prepare for lots of contingencies. Check out our Predicts video for more detail on these. We also don't usually share the information about the locations. This is to prevent inexperienced people attempting these trips, and also to limit the amount of damage that's done to the areas that we visit. This is a Google Earth video, starting in Coolgardie, going past Nullbine Rock, Victoria Rock, Burra Rock, Cave Hill and extending to our last campsite on our last trip. You can see how isolated we really are. These trips are into very remote bush, where it is unlikely you will be seen by anyone else for weeks. The Canning Stock Route, for example, is a major highway compared to the woodlines. There is generally zero mobile phone coverage out there, so a sat phone or HF radio, a PLB or spot device are essential. You must also be able to navigate and read maps, both electronic and paper, to be able to locate some of these places. Travelling out in the bush is not a task to be undertaken lightly. We do a massive amount of research prior to going, or actually I do a massive amount of research before I go, and some of the resources I use are Phil Bianchi's range of books. So I've got that one, which is the most recent one. Use that to find out a lot of information about the woodlines. Another one I use quite frequently is Rails Through the Bush by Adrian Gunsberg and Jeff Austin. A lot of really good maps in there, and I've used a lot of those to verify the tracks we're travelling on. And I have a little bag full of other books, a couple by Phil Bianchi, and then I've also got the Coates' Lonely Graves of WA, and if I go through an area I always check to see if there's any there that we can find. Always adds to the pleasure of exploring in the WA bush. And some of the other stuff I use on my computer is Aussie Explorer, where I've got heaps and heaps of campsites that I've found and locations. I don't normally share this information because I like to keep the bush to myself basically. Just don't like the wankers going out there and stuffing it up, and I've seen that happen. And the other one is Google Earth, very good resource for following old tracks in the bush. Obviously you can't use it out in the bush, but I do a lot of research and coordinate tracking on Google Earth